Hello and welcome to Sunday's edition of Weekend Waypoints for SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. Taking a look at Saturday's action around the SEC. We're also going to take a look ahead at what's left for Sunday around the conference. Got the score page pulled up here. By now, if you're watching this, you know that the scoreboard is really the only way to keep up with everything going on in a given day around college baseball. You see the scores here, and we had some wonky stuff. Some stuff that maybe you wouldn't even know was wonky, like the fact that Albany kind of hung with Tennessee for a few innings before Tennessee just went bonkers and put up 21 runs. I was at Auburn, Wichita State. That game was not competitive from the jump. Cooper McMurray hit a grand slam in the first inning, and from that point forward, that game was pretty much toast. And then we had some upsets: Belmont beating South Carolina, Georgia Southern beating Mississippi State. Cal Steven struggled in his second start with Mississippi State. So, that's obviously a Sunday game to follow, who wins that series. We talked about leading into the weekend on my weekend preview that, Mississippi State was not going to be able to just waltz into that series against Georgia Southern and expect to win just because. And, handled business the first day, but then yesterday, obviously, struggled against Georgia Southern. Couple of other things here. Missouri doubleheader with UC San Diego to finish off their time in San Diego, and 5-4 win in the finale. They played 4 games this weekend. They win 5-4 in the finale. Carrick Jackson gets ejected in that game, which means maybe I'm the only one that finds this funny, but that means the head coach for Missouri late in that game was, you guessed it, Tim Jamison. For the first time in years, Tim Jamison, the head coach at Missouri. So just an interesting little quirk there. Hello to Jeremy Scott on Facebook, who always jumps in here on my weekend waypoints with a Roll Tide. So thank you, Jeremy, for being consistent in that. I appreciate you. So that was those are the results around Saturday. Let's dive into some of these specifically. Let's talk about the game of the day. It was probably Arkansas, Oklahoma State. We're going to talk about that a little later, so let's set that aside for just a second and talk about a couple of other games. Vanderbilt Gonzaga is on this list for game of the day. Let me flip over to I have the box here. Let me flip over to that real quick so that you can follow along here with some of the stuff I'm talking about. So Vanderbilt falls behind 3-0 early in this game and then just kind of chips away. You get an RBI double for Troy LaNeve, RBI single for RJ Austin, but then in the 9th inning, Jack Bolger RBI single, and then Cam Kojal, the freshman for Vanderbilt, coming through with a walk-off hit. That's big for having to have a freshman in that spot come through that way. He's a guy they're going to need this year, so that's a big step forward for him. You love to see that, the freshman coming through in a big moment. Pitching-wise, it was interesting. Shout out to my friend Arya Gerson from the Tennessean, who I reference occasionally on this show. She watched yesterday's Waypoints and mentioned the Tennessee pitching staff going 3-3-3 yesterday. Now that, of course, as we found out, thanks to a commenter actually on the show, Ben McKee had reported that was actually due to an A.J. Russell injury concern of some sort, discomfort more like than injury. So he only threw 3 innings. In Vanderbilt's case, it was, Bryce Cunningham giving up 3 runs, walking some guys. So, he comes out, and then Ethan McIlvain and Brennan Cyber come in and throw 6 shutout innings with 1 hit allowed. So they go 3-3-3 there. And that's an interesting, especially when you have a guy like Bryce Cunningham, who's probably never going to be the most efficient starting pitcher, even in the best version of himself. That is an interesting setup for a team like Vanderbilt that has so many high-end options who can give you 3 innings, right? I mean, there's really no, especially with McIlvain, there's really no concern that he could give you that. So that is something to watch moving forward. If this is something we see with Vanderbilt a little more often throughout the season, I'd be intrigued by that. Similarly, Georgia over Northern Kentucky 7-6. Obviously not a game that Georgia would have really wanted to be in a difficult fight, but ended up in one. Sometimes that's how it goes. This game was 2-2, like through the duration. I was kind of following along with it while I was at my game in Jacksonville, but so 2-2 into the late innings. Then Northern Kentucky kind of jumps Georgia with 3 runs in the 8th. Georgia, though, comes alive late They get a run in the eighth to get one back on a Condon sack fly, but then NKU gets that run back, to take a 6-3 lead into the ninth inning. But then Colby Branch gets 3-run home run. Dylan Carter with a solo home run. So Georgia walks off with a 7-6 win, dodging what would have been a tough loss. No disrespect to Northern Kentucky, but that would have been a tough loss for Georgia if they want to even entertain the idea that they can surprise a little bit and be a regional club. Again, we'll say, like I said yesterday, we're not going to know much about Georgia until at least next weekend against Georgia Tech, but more likely well into SEC play before we kind of know what to make of Georgia. But intriguing club. I've talked about that a lot because they're such a mystery team for me. So I'm kind of fascinated by how their season ends up playing out ultimately. Player of the day. Let's talk about some candidates here. So Dalton Bargo for Tennessee, 3 for 4 with a home run. Robin Villeneuve for Tennessee, 2 for 3 with a home run and 3 runs scored. He's an interesting guy. If we'll pause here for a second. Not really a guy that was on the tip of the tongue for Tennessee in terms of guys that were going to be important pieces of their lineup necessarily, but he's forced his way into the lineup with his play. And as long as he hits like this, he's going to stick around. So that's one more piece that Tennessee has in a lineup that was already quite dangerous. So his emergence has been a big deal there. Gage Miller and Ian Petrutz for Alabama, 3 for 4 both with a home run. Big games there and their win over Valparaiso. Mitchell Daly, 3 for 4 with a home run and 6 RBIs for Kentucky. Kentucky got back on the horse after dropping a Friday game to Washington State. They beat Texas State 11-4. Kendall Rogers was on site, so he's got more on Kentucky if you want to read that on D1 Baseball. Today, big game between Kansas and Kentucky. Kansas, a much improved team. That game might not sound like much to you, but Kansas, a lot more talented and just a better club than they've been in a while. So that's not an easy test. So Kentucky looking to come out with a 2-1 weekend. It's going to have to go through Kansas to do so. Jackson Ross for Ole Miss. Ole Miss got the win against High Point they needed to even that series. Jackson Ross, 2 for 3, 2 home runs, 4 runs batted in. But the player of the day for me was Cooper McMurray from Auburn. I mentioned the first inning grand slam that he hit against Wichita State. He finishes the game 2 for 2 with 2 walks, the grand slam, and 6 runs batted in. It was a 7-inning game, so he didn't get as many chances as he otherwise would have. Perhaps he would have done even more damage in a situation where he got more plate appearances, but as it was, a very productive day for Cooper McMurray. A little bit of a breakout performance for him. He came into yesterday's game batting 118. So Auburn's, of course, going to need him in the middle lineup, him and Bobby Pierce and Ike Irish, obviously, kind of the power center, literally and figuratively, in that lineup. So him coming alive, big deal for Auburn. Big win yesterday. Auburn plays Virginia this afternoon, 4:00 Eastern time. That's a game to watch today, obviously. Both teams 2-0 this weekend. Virginia has played some thrillers. Like both games Virginia has played have been thrillers. Auburn has had the game against Iowa, I guess, was close until late, but obviously not competitive. Not a competitive game on Saturday against Wichita State. Let's talk pitchers of the day. Candidates here: Luke Holman for LSU against Northern Illinois. 7 innings pitched, 2 hits, no runs, no walks, 8 strikeouts. He continues to establish himself as probably LSU's ace at this point. It kind of felt like going into the season, Thatcher Hurd and Luke Holman on equal footing in that regard, like maybe co-aces, 1A, 1B kind of situation. And certainly, Hurd has thrown earlier in the series than Holman, so at least he's been the de facto ace. But Holman's been significantly better. And so, we're going into weekend 3 now with Holman having been the best starting pitcher for LSU, and we'll see if the rotation ultimately reflects that at some point. For Texas A&M, the duo of Justin Lampkin, Evan Oschenbeck combining for a 5-hit shutout against Wagner, a 2-0 win, kind of oddly close there against Wagner, but they get it done. This was a little bit shades of last year with the way Oschenbeck was used. He threw innings in bulk in this one, and that's where he really emerged last year, was his ability to come into outing situations like this and throw 3, 4, 5 innings and quality innings as well, not just eating innings. And he does it again here to combine on a shutout with Justin Lampkin. However, the pitcher of the day, and this is where we will get into what I think was actually the game of the day, Brady Tygart against Oklahoma State, 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. Also, interestingly, just 78 pitches. So if this were April, I'm pretty confident Tygart would have come out and thrown a little longer. It was also a very close game, so that's part of it. You'd rather take when you have some of the options that Arkansas has, you'd rather take Tygart out a little early than a little late. So maybe a little bit cautious there, but with 78 pitches in 6 innings, very efficient. That is great news for Tygart moving forward as he continues to transition from bullpen to starter. But just a fabulous game, and I'll pull up the box here. Okay, here we go. All right, so 14 innings, 2-1 Oklahoma State win. Just some wild stuff. First of all, the pitching great, really on both sides. But you see here for Arkansas, they go through 6 guys, and Jake Faraday struggled a little bit. He was great on Friday, not so good yesterday. Struggled with control. Ultimately leads to the game tying run for Oklahoma State in the 9th. But Gabe Gackle came in, got out of a jam. Came in for Faraday, got out of the jam to send the game to extra innings, and then through fully 2 2/3 innings with 6 strikeouts was really, really good. So the pitching there, look, Arkansas has so far lived up to the expectations we had for the pitching staff, that this could be the best pitching staff in the country, right? And time will tell on that, but for right now, it's hard to argue against it if someone were to make that argument. And you see 25 strikeouts in 13 1/3 innings. Again, just a extremely high amount of swing and miss for, especially when you consider, look, Cody Frank got 5 outs. They were all by strikeout. Stone Hewlett, Jake Faraday, 1 out each. They were strikeouts. Gabe Gackle got 8 outs. 6 of them were strikeouts. Fisher, 7 outs. 6 of them were strikeouts. So, they have guys coming in and just getting a lot of swing and miss. And Oklahoma State, historically, a lineup that swings and misses a lot. So I get it, but still very, very impressive stuff there. But ultimately, kudos to Oklahoma State, because they come out on the ahead in this one. And the key for me in this game for them was Gabe Davis, the reliever here, who threw 5 2/3 innings and really kept Oklahoma State from having to dip too deeply into the bullpen and run multiple guys through there. So incredible performance from him there against a very good Arkansas lineup. Scoring wise, you can see here Kendall Diggs puts Arkansas on top here in the middle innings, but then Aiden Miola with a double against Faraday, turned around. I think it was a 96-mile-an-hour fastball to get a double there to tie the game. And then in the bottom of the 14th, Lane Forsythe, a familiar name, suicide squeeze bunt. It wasn't even a safety squeeze. This was a straight-up suicide squeeze, runner going, and really, by the time the ball was fielded, I believe by Colin Fisher, the run had come across. Like, there was just no play. That's how well that was executed for Oklahoma State. So a 2-1 win there. Arkansas will take on Michigan on Sunday. Michigan 0-2 in this tournament. So certainly a good opportunity for Arkansas, as talented as Michigan is, an opportunity for Arkansas to get back on the horse here and finish off the weekend 2-1 with a quality win there. So let's talk about the game of the day. I've talked about some other options. Auburn, Virginia, certainly. I'm looking forward to that. I'll be in Jacksonville for that game. Also, once again, if you are streaming those games at D1 Baseball, Darren Vaught, Kyle Peterson have been doing the call for the Jacksonville games. For Auburn's game against Virginia, I will be in the booth again between innings 4 and 6. So the middle innings there, relieving Kyle Peterson. Obviously, I'm not a former big league pitcher, so the analysis will probably be a little thinner for me than it is with KP. Also, let's be honest, KP graduated from Stanford, and I did not. So there, a little drop off there. Manage your expectations is what I'm saying. But I've done that the last 2 days with Darren and really, really enjoyed it. And there's some silliness in it, just because I'm me. There's some silliness, but also, I am trying to give my perspective on how I see not only Auburn but the conference at large. And so Darren and I have gotten into some bigger picture conversations when we've been together in the booth. So I'll be doing that again, and I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, Michigan, Arkansas, that's intriguing. Mississippi State, Georgia Southern. State obviously needs this series win. You can say the same thing about Ole Miss against High Point, right? South Carolina, trying to secure that series win over Belmont. So you've got some teams trying to avoid upset series losses here. So those are important. But I'm fascinated by Columbia playing at Florida here in about an hour as I go live here. 11 a.m. Eastern time start. Columbia's got a commercial flight out, and so needs to get back. So early start there. But the debut on the mound of Jack Caglione. You'll recall last weekend that the back two games of that series got washed out, so Cags never took the mound. He did not throw in midweek like Liam Peterson did to get him on the mound. So this will be Cag's debut. And it's important here to, speaking of managing expectations, understanding what to expect here, given that it's his first start of the season. Also, given the fact that because of last weekend, things were kind of thrown off kilter. I would anticipate a pretty short outing for Cags, but you're looking for, hey, can you just show the electricity that you showed last year on the mound when you were at your best? How well are you throwing strikes? So there's a couple of things to look for there with Cags, but ultimately I think we're going to see a pretty short outing here, and we'll see how much, we'll talk about it, and we'll see how much we can glean from it after the fact. Mark and I, of course, will be recording Highway to Hoover this evening, and so we'll react to his start and talk a little bit about it then. A couple things to look for as I wrap up here. I've got a story on the site on Auburn's win. You can also read about Virginia's thrilling win. That was a lot of fun to write, so check that out. They're both within the same story. So if you're an Auburn fan, you can hang around and read about Virginia, get to know your enemy a little bit for tonight's game. Kendall, as I mentioned, was in Round Rock, so he's got you covered if you're a Kentucky fan. He's got you there. Aaron, of course, is in Arlington, so Arkansas fans, I know, you might not necessarily want to relive last night's affair, but nobody covers it like Aaron Fitt, and so it's always kind of interesting to read what he has to say about a game, even when your side of the ledger loses said game. And of course, all three of us will be back in our spots today. Me in Jacksonville, Kendall in Round Rock, Aaron in Arlington. So we will have you covered again. That's going to do it for this episode of Weekend Waypoints. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Enjoy the baseball on Sunday today, and I'll talk to y'all soon.